Tell the manager I quit. Back in December of 2012, I received a notice from the manager of the grocery outlet I worked at that we were getting a new member of overnight crew, scheduled to be in the following night. The crew, who consisted of myself and several others, all worked together for quite some time, and we all grew into good friends. So the next night, it's myself and 2 others on schedule when the new guy comes in. I already know his name to be Cole, so I immediately went up to introduce myself, before showing him around and telling him exactly what to expect on any given night. Surprisingly, he seemed to be a quick learner. Not that this shit is complicated, but it can be a bit tricky. But never asked any questions or made comments, almost acting as if he was either knew what he was being told or that he wasn't interested. Being the supervisor, I was pretty much the authority, but I never used it. Everyone was used to a loud atmosphere as we would play music and yell a lot. It helped keep us awake and somewhat energised. As I tried to break him in, Cole didn't seem interested, preferring to work alone and not take part in our antics. As time went on, his work began to falter. Soon he began to slow down and disappear to the back of the store for a while to do whatever, then return an hour or so later, but I always figured he was being productive and left him alone. What did surprise me though was when Cole would use a box cutter, he wouldn't cut off the tape, but instead he would stab the boxes and rip them open. I told him to be careful, but he merely gave me a shrug each time. One day, the manager called me and asked me to talk about how Cole's been doing at night. I told him about how he became slower with work and seemed much less interested, seemingly doing the bare minimum to get by. He suggested I should talk to him and I agreed. 3 nights later, it's just Brad and myself on the schedule. After doing the usual stuff for a while, it was finally break time. We decided to walk over to the gas station, convenience store nearby, and buy some stuff for our lunch break. As we got back, I noticed that the entrance door was left open. Shit, that's not good. Must have forgotten to close it. But Brad said that he did. That's odd. We head inside and continue working until lunch break. We're sitting in the break room, eating, chatting, when we both simultaneously heard something that sounded like one of the freighters moving. It happened again shortly thereafter, so I got up to check it out while Brad stayed inside the break room. I go out to the sales floor and noticed that one of the freights had moved a few feet away from where I left it originally. Also, some merchandise had fallen off and was lying on the ground. I began to put the stuff back on the freight when I heard Brad yell my name. Completely used to yelling, I casually walked back towards the break room to meet with Brad. He pointed towards the emergency exit and said that someone had just walked out, but the alarm didn't go off. I jogged up to it and peered outside and saw nothing. At first I thought this was a joke. I laughed it off and told him to stop fucking with me, but he insisted. I went out of the emergency door and walked around the store but saw no one. I came back in through the front entrance and met up with Brad once again near the break room. What did scare me though was when Brad and I walked up the emergency exit, Brad suddenly turned around and saw somebody walking. He nudged me and I had just turned around and barely seen the person walking towards the freezer and around the corner, which was all the way on the opposite end of the back store area. I ran to catch up with whoever it was but didn't see anyone when I turned the corner. The freezer was locked, so whoever it was couldn't have gotten inside unless they had a key, but only I have the key. Brad came up to me and asked if I believed him now. I said I did. Who could be in the store and how did they get in? I then thought of the left open entrance from earlier and the fact that the emergency exit door alarms were disabled. It must be someone who either works here and or is aware of our movements and the alarm system. We headed back to the sales floor to investigate some more. Nothing was knocked off the shelves, nor was the freight moved this time. I walked up near the front entrance and peered out a window towards the parking lot, but saw nobody. But then, as I turned toward the front entrance, I saw somebody walking from the parking lot to the back side of the store. This time I recognised the person. It was Cole. What the fuck? He's not supposed to be working. I yelled out to Brad, who came up to me as I told him that Cole's outside and he's heading towards the back side of the store. He nods and runs off while I follow. We waited by the emergency exits for about 5 minutes, but Cole never entered. I yelled out to Brad to head to the sales floor while I stayed back there. I could hear him run off as I stayed by the emergency exit. Out of nowhere, I turned around suddenly and saw Cole standing about 20 feet from me with a box cutter in his hand. I watched on as he glared at me. How the fuck did he end up behind me? I asked him what he was doing there and that this wasn't funny. He didn't seem to pick up on that though. Finally, when he did move, it was to position the box cutter in an upwards cutting position like he was going to stab my chest or something. But he eventually lowered it down and spoke to me. "Tell the manager I quit," Cole then turned, put the box cutter in his pocket and walked towards the opposite end once again, towards the freezer, and turned the corner, disappearing. I stood there in shock for about a minute when Brad came running back to me. He asked if I saw Cole, and I told him I did. Heading off towards the freezer, Brad asked what we should do. I told him what had happened, but insisted we just let it go for now. I waited until the manager arrived a couple of hours later and told him that Cole had told me he quit, but didn't go into any detail. I decided not to tell the manager about what had happened, nor any other co-workers for that matter. I didn't want to escalate this any further than it already had. It wasn't until Brad said something that the police became involved, and I then learned after talking with the authorities that Cole has a mental health record, and I should have reported what happened and not kept it a secret regardless of my reasoning.